Hey, this is Dr. Paul Firnhaber, and it's time for another 10 minutes of truth because it's Wednesday. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the vagus nerve and some of the scientific research on the vagus nerve. So let me just start by saying that the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve that arises from the brainstem right back here. It comes down your neck, down across the front of your neck, and it innervates your heart, your lungs, and your entire gastrointestinal system. Now, the vagus nerve is your primary parasympathetic stimulator of your body. Now, let me explain between sympathetic and parasympathetic. Your sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight. And that's how you feel when you're scared or you're angry or very nervous. That's your sympathetic nervous system kicking in. That's when your digestion stops, your mouth gets very dry, and you're ready to run or you're ready to fight. Now, when your sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive, your body cannot heal. Your body can only heal in a parasympathetic state. So the vagus nerve is the primary driver of your parasympathetic nervous system. So when you have vagus nerve dysfunction, that means your parasympathetic nervous system is not functioning very well, and your vagus nerve is in imbalance. So the first article that I want to cover today is an article out of the Journal of Clinical Medicine, October 2018. I want to say the Journal of Clinical Medicine is a top-notch journal. The name of the article is "The Vagus Nerve Can Predict and Possibly Modulate Non-Communicable Chronic Diseases." Now, what does that mean? Well, high vagal nerve activity alters homeostasis. Now, what is homeostasis? Homeostasis is our body's ability to adapt to the surroundings, to adapt to life around it. So homeostasis would mean, for example, emotionally adapting to your job, adapting to your family, adapting to school, adapting to what you eat, okay? That's the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve alters homeostasis, and more vagal nerve activity is better homeostasis, a better ability to adapt. Now, vagal nerve activity predicts the risk and prognosis of much of the global burden of disease. And the global burden of disease is primarily three things. Not only these three, but the majority of these three: cardiovascular disease, cancer, and COPD, cardio obstructive pulmonary disease. Now, these diseases and other diseases have this in common: oxidative stress, inflammation, and excessive sympathetic activity. Vagal nerve activity is also related to frontal brain activity. The frontal brain activity regulates unhealthy lifestyles. So the frontal brain regulates emotion, urges, impulses, executive decisions, very much influenced by the vagus nerve. Increase in vagal nerve activity causes lower oxidative stress, lower inflammation, and lower excess sympathetic activity. So if you want to lower the amount of inflammation in your body, increase vagal nerve activity. Evidence exists for the beneficial of vagal nerve activation in diabetes, stroke, myocardial infarction, and possibly cancer. Vagal nerve stimulation increases executive control and emotional regulation, possibly relevant to emotional eating. Now, this is really important because there's this gut-brain connection. Your gut has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system, and it pretty much can function on its own. However, you have the vagus nerve connecting your gut to the brain. So your gut is a primary instigator of immune function. 80% of your immune function is in your gut. So your gut sends messages to your brain telling it how the immune system is functioning. It sends messages to your brain concerning emotions. For example, most of your neurotransmitters are made in your gut. So there's this gut-brain connection that's connected through the vagus nerve. So whatever happens in your gut can affect your brain. This is why gut bacteria are so important, because when there's a gut bacteria dysfunction or an imbalance, that can actually affect us emotionally through the action of the vagus nerve. Finally, the vagus nerve plays an important role in the pathogenesis of psychiatric disorders, obesity, as well as other stress-induced inflammatory disorders. So what happens is the vagus nerve plays a role in things like post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, all those psychiatric disorders. The vagus nerve is involved. So what can we do to help the vagus nerve along? Well, we can stimulate vagal nerve function, and I have a device here in the office called a stim pod, which actually stimulates the vagus nerve. It's not only stimulating the vagus nerve, but it's stimulating the right frontal lobe of the brain, which is where most of the psychiatric and emotional problems occur in the brain, is the right frontal lobe. So when I stimulate the vagus nerve in the right frontal lobe, there's certain things in the body that happen. Number one is parasympathetic response is increased, which means energy is increased, digestion is better, and there's more emotional stability. And I've seen all of this happen by stimulating vagus nerve. You don't need any drugs, you don't need any supplements, you don't need to do anything but stimulate the vagus nerve. Now there's other things that will stimulate vagus nerve function, such as exercise, meditation, prayer, things like that stimulate the vagus nerve. But in terms of a clinical setting, the best thing that I've seen is using the stim pod in the left ear for 7 minutes. Very, very powerful for stimulating vagus nerve. Now, the last thing I'm going to say is part of this 10 Minutes of Truth came out of this journal here in Frontiers of Psychiatry. And the name of this journal is called Vagus Nerve as Modulator of the Gut-Brain Axis in Psychiatric and Inflammatory Disorders. Again, this is also a 2018 article. So here's 2 articles in 2 different journals talking about the power of stimulating the vagus nerve and the huge clinical and beneficial effects it can have on the body. And I'm going to say that we do that here at Lincoln Disc and Nutrition. It's a 7-minute procedure. It's not painful, and it can have some very, very powerful effects on your health. So if you know of people who have had issues, and most of you do, like depression, anxiety, fatigue, GI issues that have not been helped, it's possible they have a vagal nerve imbalance and need that vagus nerve stimulated. Now, how long does it take? Sometimes I've seen results in 1 session, but sometimes it takes many sessions for that vagus nerve to finally come online and to stimulate the right frontal lobe of the brain so it works properly. So give our office a call, 402-488-2220, and Carmen can answer any questions about what I've talked about, and perhaps we can help you. We'll see you next week for another 10 Minutes of Truth.